kid up near St. Rose. He was found to death by cop.
Oh, yeah, this was a few weeks ago?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, the kid took off and they have a policy, don't chase him through the, so
He said he kept going in front of Division One trying to get the cop to chase him.
And he found him right up near the corner of St. Rose where the Episcopal Church is there. And the cop comes around and the kid squeezes one off. And, he hits the cop in the leg.
Jesus.
And then the second shot, the kid killed himself.
Right, it was suicide.
Yeah. Do we have to do this for?
Yeah.
Hi.
Madam Chair?
Everybody is here. Excelente. Okay, welcome everybody. And I will call the roll. I am here. William, are you here?
William is here.
Paul, are you here?
I'm here.
Excellent, everyone is present. All right, I just looked at the minutes and they look fine to me. I make a motion to approve them as presented.
Second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great. Okay. On to you, Joe or Chris, whoever is making the presentation. Looks like Chris.
No.
Yeah, I'll start and then Chris, will fill in anything that I leave out. So what we have in front of you is a clean version and a red line version of the proposed amendments to the uniform tax exemption policy. I think it's easier if you look at the red line version, if you pull that up. And Bill, thanks for those comments that you sent to us. We appreciate the close read, so thank you. We'll catch those in the next draft. I think if you go to, and I'm sorry, on
These pages.
the red line, yeah, it's not numbered. If you go
They're
to
gonna call it pages.
If you go to section 1806C, what I'll do is I'll start explaining what we did. So section 1806C.
It's 1807, Joe.
Is it 1807? Yep. Yeah, 1807, sorry about that, yep, 1807. So you'll see that we added language in toward the middle of the page and below, and it's pretty dense text. What essentially is saying is that we don't reduce in the pilot agreement, we don't reduce the amount of existing taxes being paid with respect to the project. All we do is, or all we're going to do is give an abatement to the increase in assessed value due to the undertaking of the project. So it's a simple situation. If you've got a green site, land, they'll pay 100% of the land value, right? And then the abatement will go to whatever the building improvement, the building construction goes to. When you have an existing building, what happens is that the assessor will give us a number for the land in the existing building, and they'll pay 100% of that. And then they'll pay the abated piece on the increase in assessed value due to the undertaking of the project. So if they do, $3 million of improvements to the building, whatever the increase in assessed value is what the abatement schedule is applied to. So that's what that language all refers to. The meat of the document is the next page in the subheading entitled Amount of Abatement, and you'll see the new language there, which is the second part of that paragraph. And really what that is, and what I'll do is I'll summarize it, is when we met last time, we talked about the staff under Kevin's leadership would look at the project and make some decisions and recommendations with respect to the project. Those recommendations and decisions would be based in part on Schedule B at the end of the amendment. And if you look at Schedule B, that's a consolidation of the matrix elements that were in Ulster County and Clinton County. We took all the items that were positives in those two jurisdictions and listed them there. And what we did was, frankly, to keep it simple and to recognize that there's going to be a variety of different projects that are going to come before the board and that the staff is going to look at. We didn't do a points analysis. We didn't assess or assign points to each of these elements. And we didn't then create categories based on the number of points assembled or received. What we did was we directed the staff to come up with a recommendation based on the the three categories that are described in Schedule A, which has a 10-year schedule, a 15-year schedule, and a 20-year schedule. And and in that paragraph that I started with, the staff will do an analysis, look at the elements, look at what's needed with respect to the project pro forma, and then provide you with a written recommendation. And as part of that written recommendation, the staff will also report about their discussions with the local jurisdictions, because one of the elements of this amendment is to eliminate the local approval that we had originally in our uniform tax exemption policy. But the sense of the board or the sense of the committee was that we certainly didn't want to ignore the locals, and that certainly wasn't Kevin's intent. And really what we have is kind of a model of what we would do based on the Regeneron project, because what happened with Regeneron is that they made a request. The request was very aggressive, and actually would have gotten us in a lot of trouble because they applied their abatement schedule to the existing taxes even. So the taxes actually would have gone down for that
Nice
site,
deal if you can get it.
which would have,
Don't ask, you don't get.
you would have had pitchforks out in front of the building here. So what we did working with Kevin is that we generated, and Bill, you talked about coming up with some scenarios. I started to run some numbers, and then I said, wait a minute, I'm just a lawyer. I'm gonna, I'm not gonna. It's that I'm gonna shoot my own foot off. So what we did with Regeneron is that we came up with some scenarios that under a 10-year plan with a variety of abatement numbers, and ran those numbers all starting from the starting point of not reducing existing taxes. And we looked at the amount of the savings, and we looked at the type of the project. And then Kevin had discussions with the local jurisdictions, and he also had discussions with the company, and he was able to reach a reasonable accommodation. And then he made that recommendation to the board at a full meeting. So really what that paragraph under the subheading amount of abatement is frankly an actual drafting of what we did on the Regeneron project. So what you would expect to see on a going forward basis is, assuming that we adopt these amendments, is that Kevin and his team would put together numbers, would look at those numbers based on the characteristics or the elements of the project, namely how much, for instance, of the matrix items that are described in Schedule B are part of the project, and what the company is willing to sign on to. And I know, Bill, I think you've mentioned this in a couple of previous meetings, those elements would be contained in the clawback agreement. So if they said they were going to have WMDE, they would have to report on that on an annual basis. And if they failed to have that MWBE, then under the clawback agreements that, our office and Chris would prepare, there'd be a clawback and or a default and or restructuring of the pilot, there'd be, the company would have to come back in and we would work through issues. So the idea here is to have something with some definitiveness, but at the same time giving the staff the flexibility to look at it, come up with a reasonable structure, and then obviously all subject to your review. And part of your review would be to say, Kevin, how did this go with the village, the town, and the school district? So that's really what we did here. Obviously, we could tease out some of that language under amount of abatement if you want more in the report from Kevin. If you want more elements under Schedule B, and maybe this is, it's, a policy, in my view, is a living, breathing document. You go through a couple of projects, right? And, we've seen that with our other ideas. And you add things, you subtract things as things work or not work. And, Kevin actually made a good point on Monday morning when we went through this. This document may not be applicable or really well suited for housing, because you had talked about, you'll see housing projects being done in the Capital District with very long pilot abatement schedules, 25, 30 years. And what we have here is 10, 15, and 20. So maybe we need to add some provisions in here for housing. But again, that gets back to, what your mission is, how much, what you want to accomplish and stimulate. I mean, for instance, there are some of our IDA clients have identified as housing as their primary purpose, because they want to increase activity in the downtown. They want to increase, 24/7. They see
Workforce housing.
Exactly, providing workforce housing for people that maybe are being priced out of the housing market in that jurisdiction. So that might be something that we look at on a next stage basis with respect to the amendment. But what we try to do is accomplish and put to words the discussion points that we had at the last meeting. And so with that, I'll pass it back to you all.
So, Paul and Bill, how do you guys feel about the matrix as it is presented?
I think it's beneficial to have some flexibility based on, each project and the needs of each project. My only question is, before there was no clawback for construction jobs provided, would that now fall under this matrix?
Good question. Let's see.
What you said, would it fall under what?
So before, if an applicant said they would provide so many local construction jobs and they didn't, there was no way to, I guess, to get the benefits back or take any action on it. My question is, if we're making the decision based on this schedule here,
Could
would
they
that?
cook that into the recapture?
Well, yeah, I think, and the issue, this gets back to the labor policy that we adopted, right? Which was, the way we handled that was we didn't go for, or we didn't adopt a policy, and, Kevin can jump in, with his memory also, and with the actual policy. But the concern we had was imposing local labor on project applicants. So the tack that we took was to require them to provide reports as to the amount of local labor being hired. If, however, we did a particular project and that particular project applicant said, we're going to do 90% local labor, and that was part of the pilot terms that we and the pilot terms were negotiated in part reliance on that, then yes, there would be a clawback. But in the general case, unless it was something that we put in the document, it would not be part of the document. we get the notices.
Mm.
But if it was part of the negotiation, yes.
You know, and I think we also agree that we, as it relates to the local labor policy, that we do this for a period of time, see what happens. Is it, you know, is it responsive? Is it doing what we hope it's gonna do? You know, the one we had, which I can fortunately say was before my time, but that solar project down in Queens was just, you know, so, you know, I think they projected that they would create 2 jobs and had to cut that in half by 50, they had to cut that by 50%. So they only wound up creating 1 job. And then a lot of the labor, as Paul pointed out, seemed to be out of state, even not only out of region, but
That was something the guy actually came and expressed concern about before it was approved,
Right, over the public I think that was the meeting where they knocked down the full-time job. And we had public comment there.
you know, and these solar projects, you know, we're encouraged to do these for reasons other than our normal economic development. They,
Right.
you know, we're doing it to decarbonize and to, you know, get greener energy and all that stuff. But, you know, it's not something we look for or seek after. And, you know, personally, it does little to nothing for the economy of the county. But, you know, environmentally, people like it, you know, so.
That's one thing that I wanted to include in the matrix that I don't see here is the extended manufacturer responsibility, especially for something like a solar farm. We want to, if we're going to be, you know, making allowances for them and incentivizing them to come, we want to get back from them a promise that they would take care of the panels at the end of their life.
Decommissioning.
Sure, yeah.
And
So,
another thing that you brought up, Joe, that I don't see referenced here, the example that you used here at the table was MWBEs, and I don't see that in the matrix either.
well, we can add that.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
You know, knowing that, you know, we're not gonna meet every single one of these on every single deal.
right.
These will be considerations for you guys to take into consider. You know, basically what I need is, I need the ability to negotiate deals,
Right.
because they're not cookie cutter.
Right.
You know, as Joe pointed out, you know, listen, everybody, the town, the village, the school district, the town general on into the village of Manans. You know, it's the first time, it's a high visibility logo for the village. But I just need the ability to negotiate deals with these companies and not be, you know, kind of hamstrung with
I get it.
predetermined, because all these companies are different. Some are, you know, able to do more, others
Mhm.
less.
But I like the idea that we're putting it
Yeah.
out there, that that's
Yeah.
what we would like to
There's
see.
and now you're right, we have a structure and a matrix that, you know, we can evaluate
Mhm.
whatever deal I bring to you against. You can say, well, you know, why did you do this on this particular deal? And, you know, which of the matrices that we have here did you use to guide your negotiation, your discussion?
Yeah, so, Marlene, I'm taking notes. I added MWBE, and what was the other one you said?
Extended manufacturer responsibility, they refer to it as EMR. The county actually took this up with some legislation on the county level a couple of years. I don't know if it ended up passing or not, especially in the case of solar farms. When, you know, at the end of their life cycle, there's really not much you can do
Yeah,
with them.
Yeah, nobody wants anything to do with that.
Right,
Well, you know, the one down in Queens, I understand, you probably know this better than I did. It was some guy who farmed the land all his life, no kids and nobody else to pick up the thing. And the only way he could extract any value out of his property was to sell it to this Hecate, I think they may be changed now, this solar group out of Chicago.
Yeah.
You know, they look terrible, you know.
so did Hecate sell?
Did they sell that? Because I saw a name change somewhere. Was it something else that changed to Hecate or?
I do recall Hackney. I just want to say though that I've done a ton of solar deals, for better or for worse. And we have a lot of language on decommissioning, the exact concept you're talking about. In other words, the company goes away, a successor steps in. What about these panels when they're obsolete? Who takes care of them? They've got chemicals, they've got bad things in them. So we can.
And solar is not the only industry we should be considering that for either,
Yeah.
really. And I feel like this document, the way the language is written, gives you a lot of leeway.
Yeah.
I mean, I do want to,
Which is what you want.
right,
I mean,
it
you want-
is.
You want me to be able
It's
to
true. It's true.
negotiate deals
Mhm.
within parameters, and you've laid out some of those parameters here, right? I mean, we don't want to make it so rigid that, you put us at
Of course.
over the county at a disadvantage.
Of course.
But, just so you know, we don't actively pursue solar deals. But it's just not really our strategy. That's not.
I've gotten that message going over the years.
Other people in the county may be looking to promote solar, and, the state, they've got this,
Right?
what is it, climate, CPC,
2040, right? It's
20, I think it's actually 2030.
Yeah,
or 20
it's 23rd.
That, we're supposed to have some unobtainable level of our energy
Right.
made from, it's never gonna happen.
And how does the legislature feel about, getting more in line with the governor's ideas on renewable energy?
Democrats support, the Republicans are adamantly opposed to it.
And who, at the AACA, you answer to the legislature or you answer to Dan?
Both. We have,
Okay.
our board is comprised, 3 appointees from the legislature, 4 appointees from the county executive.
Okay.
But it's all majority controlled, mostly democratically controlled in the legislature because it's so overwhelmingly Democratic. But the Republicans in the county legislature don't like renewable energy, and they constantly, berate the offshore wind stuff we're trying to do, and plug power, hydrogen stuff.
Interesting. So is there anything else? Could we take a look at the Ulster County matrix? Can somebody pull that out? I just want to take a quick look because I felt like that was pretty comprehensive. Just want to make sure there's nothing else that we're missing.
Yeah,
I do have a copy.
What I did do was, all of those items are listed here.
I was gonna say, this is the Ulster County matrix, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a combination of Ulster and
Yeah, you said
Clinton.
Clinton, right?
And Clinton.
Yep.
Yeah, we took every item that was in there and put it on Schedule B.
Now Clinton has a point system.
Like,
You're kind of locked into that point system unless you want to deviate from it. This is different, it's just, these are the categories.
So how about this, Kevin? How about if you take us through a scenario, like an average project? I don't know if there is any average project because we do so many different,
Yeah, so.
and how this
Well,
would apply.
let's just talk about Regeneron, I don't recall the numbers exactly, but I think they bought the facility for $17-18 million, and they put, I think, 5 or 6 into it, so you've got, a increased, value of the project of, I think it was 20-something million dollars. And I think there was a miscommunication at the beginning where Regeneron wanted the pilot applied to not only the new assessed new taxes based on the improvements, but the existing taxes, and that's just something we wouldn't do. And they admitted very readily that was a miscalculation on their part. But, we sat down with them, we, kind of worked out a pilot schedule. We socialized that with the village of Manans and the school district, who were the most involved in it. The town of Colony didn't really seem to be that interested. And, they just wanted to make sure that, that their existing tax levy was not going to be affected on it. And for that, what they got is the first project by Regeneron in Albany County. 80 jobs, average annual salary, very high. I think it was like $112,000 per year, average annual salary. And the part that was discussed, but not really talked about in any great detail was that there's a phase two that's going to come on this project, which could be upwards of a $200 million manufacturing facility, because the total property was, I think, 20 acres or something like that. And there was a configuration that Columbia Development did for them that the site, I think the original building was 190,000 square feet, and the site could accommodate another large development on the property. So the village was very motivated to, be accommodating to Regeneron for the hopes of this future development. And there are some other things going on that we're working on, but, that was without this, so if we applied that situation to this, we'd come in with, the kind of matrix and the various elements checked off, which ones does this project apply to, and, which of these three categories of exemption would we apply it to? What I see right now is more the 10 to 15 year range of projects. Plug Power out in Bethlehem and New Scotland, I think was 12, I want to say, Joe?
It was 12.
12 years.
Yeah, that's right.
And now we're going to be coming back in with another project for Plug Power out there, because you heard they're moving their headquarters out there. They've already been talking to us about some sales tax exemptions out there. So, we're not going to see projects here that the locals are fighting us on the exemption. There's no upside to that, even, and we could do it. We can push it through or bully our way into it, but it doesn't make for good, good cooperation and economic development. The one that I really want the board to give, me the approval to do is these fixed dollar payments. Because I know I've talked to you about this in the past, but out at Plug Power, this is 1,600 new jobs. And even with all Plug's issues, by the way, yesterday they were just approved for their $1.6 billion loan from the Department of Energy. So Plug is going to be fine. Everybody's breathing easier. But we had a situation there that we agreed to a pilot schedule. Joe helped us construct one, and it was a percentage of the assessed value.
Right.
So we go along, everybody's on board,
Right.
the two town supervisors from Bethlehem and New Scotland, and then the assessor, I think elected assessor.
We were all here, we know, we don't have to recap again.
It was just a terrible, on an otherwise perfect project, and we had to bring in the big guns of Paul Goldman and it was all resolved, but it was just
So without a point system, this is really quite subjective.
Yep.
So it does give you a lot of leeway. How do you guys feel about that?
I think that's what they're asking for.
I can see that. I'm asking you.
I think that's what the projects, I can't have a regimented schedule, because there's always going to be exceptions, and, like Joe said, our strategy is not to do housing, but Mark Paquin, for example, just bought the old Blue Cross Blue Shield building out on Route 85, and he's going to be doing a development, and this won't come through us, it'll probably go through the Bethlehem IDA, I assume. But they've got this thing where it's got to be a hamlet, which means that it's going to be housing plus other stuff, other, walkable amenities.
That
Like
is
what
the-
Windsor did out next door.
Right, exactly.
That- oh,
Larry,
yeah.
Miller and
Decker.
Becker, right?
So what is there in there? There's a bake for you in a gym? Does that
I don't
make it
know.
qualify?
You know, Marlene, the issue I'll make about the points and not having a rigid, if you will, system is that it's actually pretty hard. We would have to spend a couple of months, you know, looking at the numbers and, you know, like, for instance, I'll give you an example. Item 1 on Schedule B, the projected number of new permanent full-time equivalent jobs to be created by the project. You know, Ulster has, if you're creating between 0 and 5, you get 1 point. If you create between 5 and 15, you get 2. And if you're creating over 15, you get 3. Well, are those legitimate points given the kind of projects that Kevin's looking at? So, and then you have to look at how that ripples through as to whether that puts you into a 10-year schedule, a 15-year schedule, or a 20-year schedule. And whether there's too many points or whether you're being too easy or too hard. And it's actually a very difficult process because I've gone through it with several IDAs and it's really focused on the kind of projects that they are looking to develop. You know, for instance, one of our IDA clients has a really sophisticated points system for housing. And it all depends on how much investment is being done in the housing, whether it's new or an existing building. So there may be where I'm reading too much into your questions. If there's some discomfiture about the level of discretion, I think really what that does is put more, frankly, some, you know, burden on the board.
Yeah, for sure.
To look at the
For sure.
report, to look at the report that Kevin is preparing, and frankly, at the risk of you know, he may throw a shoe at me. It is how much of a conversation he's had with the locals, so that this structure that he's recommending to you is not going to create pitchforks in the street in front of your office. So I think what it does is give him the flexibility to do the larger projects, but it also puts some pressure on you to ask some difficult questions and say, you know, why did you, you know, if he comes to you with a 15-year pilot, you should ask him, well, wait a minute, what got you from 10 to 15?
Right.
You know?
I'd love to see the proposed agreements a little bit further in advance if possible.
What do you?
The proposed agreements from the projects.
I think, you know, what,
We try to get it out a week ahead of time, and it's a struggle because these, you know, we've, you know, thankfully the good officer Hudson Russ, you know, they oftentimes, we get an application and it's a little bit of an iterative process that, just to make sure that all the i's are dotted. You know, we can try, but it's tough to get it out much more than, but you've also got, you know, you approve the application
Right,
and
that's true.
approve the public hearing. So you've got another
That's
month before you,
Yeah.
you know, we actually.
So I think kind of what you're asking and is, can it come to us before it's more a fait accompli,
Yeah.
already a done deal,
Right.
agreed upon? That, you know, this is just a recommendation, right? The decision is the board's decision.
Correct.
Whether
The
to
board's
grant or
decision,
not. So
absolutely.
since there's a lot of subjectivity
Right.
and there needs to be, and the staff, you know, Kevin's group, making their recommendation that there just maybe needs to be a little more time if there can be, to the board being educated as to
Yeah,
what the recommendation is gonna be before it's done. Not to hamstring you, because I think, you know, you need to have a lot of freedom in making these deals. I have some basic questions on, Joe referred to this document as as dense, and I think it is kind of dense. It's just like, I wouldn't, you might not want to venture into numbers, I don't want to venture into rewriting uniform tax exempt policies. And I really have a hard time even actually reading them because it's a foreign language. It's very obtuse and the language is difficult. So I just had some basic questions about what's here and how much flexibility or lack of flexibility is here. We talk about the dealing with the assessor and the initial assessment and the final assessment, and there's also the notion of the tax rate. And it could be over a period of 20 years.
Right.
This is, how do you deal with an assessor on that? I mean, the assessor may not be willing or feel he has the authority to bind the taxing jurisdiction on a tax rate that's 10, 15, 20 years into the future. Just kind of a practical thing. I don't know how that works and what flexibility this document gives to that. Also, with respect to the categories, you've got 3 categories outlined here. I would assume, but I don't know, that the document would allow creation of additional categories or additional different recommendations, different categories than these 3 that happen to be here by example. So I'd like to know whether the document as drafted provides for that. And then back to another issue on the local approval, Kevin made a point that said, it just wouldn't be good economic development policy to be fighting with the locals about what to do. But is it that we have the authority and we're just going to the locals as a matter of courtesy, or do we actually need their approval? I think it's the former, not the latter. So I just want to understand those issues a little bit
I'll take
better.
the last one. So the approval of the tax jurisdictions is out. The approval of the tax jurisdictions has been stripped from the original UTIP, so we'll no longer need that.
So there's no approval message. So it's basically a courtesy call back to, and it's,
Correct.
and it says that you're going to talk to them about that. I saw that part of
In
that.
the recommendation, in his recommendation to the board, he's gonna give you a status of that,
Okay.
But their consent is not required.
but their
Okay.
consent is not required, correct?
And what about the
going
fixed dollar part, which is really critical on these bigger deals especially?
Right, so going in reverse, I'm trying to keep track of the list of items. We can deviate from this, and it's in section 1808, where you can deviate from your policy. So if you want to do a 25-year policy, a 25-year pilot, or a 5-year pilot, or a 30-year pilot, you can do that, and you follow the deviation procedures that are outlined in section 1808, which is the next page. And in order to do that, you need to provide formal notice to the taxing jurisdictions. You don't need their consents, but you need to send them.
So if you're going to pick from other than column A, B, or C, you have to then go to them and say, this is
So we
an alternative.
we send them a note, we send them a letter, and the letter actually has a number of findings in it as to why we're doing that, okay?
It's pretty in-depth. It's a 3 or 4 page letter that goes out. It's not just, hey, we're deviating. It's what the deviation is, why we're doing it, what effect the deviation will have on the local community. But again, that going out for deviation, you still don't need the approval of the tax jurisdictions under this.
Right.
And then.
And those will happen.
Well, I know these 3 policies you have here are totally different than, I live in the Clifton Park world, and their standard policy is 100% exemption on the Delta for 5 years. And then they start ratcheting up, 60, 70, 80.
And we
By
could do
10
that
years,
as well.
you're fully assessed.
And we could do that as well. The thing that I try to do with this is, talk to the company and say, guys, tell me what you need and why you need it. And, somebody might say, well, listen, this is a big capital intensive project and it's going to take me 3 or 4 years to really ramp up to full production on this. And that's why I may need, 0 tax payment for the first 5 years and then ramp it up after that. I know that these offshore wind projects are going to be long-term projects. They're going to be like the kind of deal you guys did with Lafarge. probably, which is it what, 20, Joe, if I
Yeah,
recall?
at least 20.
20
Yeah,
or more.
yeah.
Because they're just huge. They're, GE project, which is, since kind of been stalled a little bit, but that was an $800 or $900 million project. Huge, thousands of jobs, and we're probably gonna see some of those, if this offshore wind thing gets back on track. It's right now a little derailed, but I think we're told it's all gonna get back on track again.
So if you can't get
That's
the
right.
assessor to set your tax rate 10 years into the future or 20 years in the future, how do you deal with that? You just say what it's gonna be, go outside the assessor world and establish something?
Well, that's where I was going to.
Sorry, I cut you off.
No, that's okay. That was
Stay
your,
on the list.
that was your first comment that was your first item on the list. So if you go to the red line,
And Joe, isn't that what we did with Regeneron?
Yeah.
We put an escalator in the,
if you go to the red line and, let's see. Here we are. So if you go to the red line, fixed payments,
Right,
right there, okay? Fixed payments.
consulted with the assessor,
So
right?
what you do is you talk to the assessor and, oops, sorry, it's the other way. And we, yeah, right here. So it's that language and it carries over. So there were forward estimates there, Bill. And what we did with Regeneron was we came up with the assessor's help and understanding the assessor's formula for coming up with a value. We came up with a value for the project as acquired and the project as improved. And then we added, and you're right, what's the tax rate gonna be 10 years from now?
Right.
So we put an escalator in, and we used an escalator of I believe it was 3%.
So you take your best guess and you hope that it keeps the municipality or the school
Right,
district happy.
And, yeah, and you know what's happened sometimes is that the fixed payment is actually
higher
higher than
Could be, sure.
what they would otherwise be paying. But, you can't have it both ways, right?
Yeah.
If you want certainty.
You're probably gonna try to assume they're gonna live within the tax cap, whatever that
Bill,
is.
you know from your own business, these business guys crave certainty. They want to know. It's the unpredictability that is the thing that makes them really skittish about things.
Right.
Even if, you have that rare situation where you might be paying more after the pilot payment than you would have otherwise, but
But this will be the question that you'll ask.
This is an important thing that we'll have to ask.
Yeah, and
when
you'll
these
say,
things
okay,
come to us
okay,
about
you know,
what escalator did you build into the taxes? Did you
right.
build in
And
0.5% or did you build in 3%? Because that's important stuff.
absolutely, and what was the locals' reaction to that?
Right.
The local said, yeah, that's good,
And, part of the calculation on this is, this was never got public, but we did have a little back and forth with the Bethlehem school superintendent. And, I think
They were digging their heels in, or they had
Well-
a different impression of,
well, they were getting, I think, I want to say $50,000 a year from Vista without plug.
right, land.
With plug and the pilot agreement, I think they would have gotten something like $3 million a year. And there was no additional cost to the school district because of this project out there.
There was no rash of new students flooding the.
No. So, and that's the conversation I had with the superintendent of the schools or I forget, maybe it was the business manager. And, she backed down on it. But, for 15 years, this site has been empty, right?
It's found money.
I'm sorry?
It's found money.
Yeah, it's found money and no expenses, no new expense. So, there are, and those are the kind of things that I'll come back to you with, that, listen, this pilot may look deep but here's the reason why it makes sense. It's the number of jobs, the average annual salaries, the, numbers of MWBEs that are hired or those kind of considerations.
Did you get all of your questions answered?
I did, yes,
Okay.
thank you.
So what are next steps, Joe?
Well, Chris and I have actually talked about that. Procedurally, I think it's recommend to the full board, right? And then the full board agrees to do the amendments, and as part of the amendments, we need to hold a public
Should
hearing.
do a public hearing.
That's our recommendation to you. It's a conservative recommendation, because the statute really doesn't, not really, it doesn't outline a process for amending your UTEP.
Okay.
When the statute was first adopted, requiring IDAs to have a UTEP, the statute actually said that you needed to hold a public hearing, you need to notify each of the affected taxing jurisdictions of your original UTEP. But they, you know, the brilliance of our New York State Legislature, they left the second part blank. But what we would recommend, and I think it's good PR,
Transparency.
is to send a note to the, notice a public hearing and hold a public hearing with respect to the amendments.
And of course, none of this is retroactive, right? This is all for new
No.
projects.
All going forward, yeah. That would make us crazy if we tried to.
So how do you
And
guys feel
hopefully-
about it?
I think it's the direction that has been asked for. I think that we should have some faith in our economic development team to go forward with it. And I think we ultimately have the ability to say no, if it seems like it's, over the top. And the thing I think is most important, something new, is a little more time
Yeah.
between what, what's being talked about, and geez, it's a done deal already and you can't go back. And then that becomes a rubber stamp as opposed to a real
Yeah,
process.
we'll give some thought to the logistics of that. How we-
Sure.
And things have gotten much better in that regard, I think, too, over, since your.
Well,
has been around.
we now have, a little bit of a
A
sense.
breath of fresh air. to tell you the
So
truth.
Paul, what do you think?
Just whisper in the ABO's ear to that effect. That would be-
Yeah, I think
Amy's
flex
taking
it
care
up.
of all those problems, though, right? And,
Yeah, well,
or more or less.
we're
Still working on it, Chris?
95% there, Chris?
Yes, yes.
That's-
So the latest one was, why did Walt Foreman only get X numbers of dollars for 2023? And it was because he was only employed for half the
Shannon
year.
handled that one. Yeah, Shannon, our, great associates handling that part of it.
Well, but they're looking at this stuff.
Yep.
They're looking at this stuff, so I agree with Joe. I think it's a good idea for you to, even though you don't have to, it's a good idea to adopt a policy by board resolution and have it on the books and, have it in our minutes and.
So Paul, I'm sorry, I don't think you got to say.
No, I think it's, the flexibility is essential when negotiating based on the needs of the projects. I would hope that jobs, whether full-time or construction, would continue to be a major factor on
It's the whole
decisions.
game.
That's, the business we're in, creating jobs.
Mhm.
I mean, we're looking for high dollar capital investment, high job numbers of decent paying jobs.
Mhm.
And that's, so far, we've been pretty good at that. We've got Atlas Copco out in Voorheesville coming in at the next meeting. They're doing a very nice expansion out there. I've been in touch with not the towns, I get Voorheesville, what's Rich Stroud? He's a
The village.
village mayor.
Yeah, mayor.
Yeah. Great project, I think, I don't know, $10, $20 million project?
Yeah.
Something like
Decent size.
Good size.
that. But it cements them here. They could have done this elsewhere. They're a subsidiary of a much larger company. And,
What do they do?
Industrial tools, I think.
yeah, something to
Swedish
do with vacuums and industrial vacuum components, and they're part of what's the parent company's name? It's something vacuum. They're doing the project. What was the project?
It's Atlas Copco, Comtech, Atlas Copco compressors. They do
Yeah,
something with
they-
compressors.
That's right, compressors.
Denmark company? or-
Swedish,
yeah.
$1 billion company, huge company.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
There's a couple other projects percolating, nothing yet. The only other one we pretty much sure is you're gonna see another application from, Plug Power and probably another application from Columbia too. They probably, right, for Plug?
For
Vista?
the building, yeah.
So, but on the horizon right now, those are the only,
Is Plug moving forward with the battery facility on Kriegel?
I think they already did that. I think
Okay,
that, because that was just a lease, I think, that they
okay.
were. And, who knows, now that they've got this, this big financing facility, this $1.6 billion, that's helps them fund their business plan. And hopefully they'll hit profitability and, they've asked that, we've got another $3 million of incentive payments, and they've asked if we would accelerate that if they did the headquarters out there, which I'm working through with the legislative leaders, which they'll probably agree to.
Where are the incentive payments coming from?
$2 million came from the IDA cash, and $3 million came through a special created program by the county legislature called the STAGE program.
Oh, yes.
Sustainable Technology and Green Energy, so
Okay.
2 and 3. And we are in discussions with another, I haven't even talked to Joe and Chris about this one, but a semiconductor supply company that's interested out of Vista.
Oh, that's okay.
Vista,
So how much space is still left of this stuff?
I think 11 acres. No.
Is that one parcel?
111 acres.
Oh,
Yeah. No, there's a bit of property still left out there.
lots of opportunity.
Yeah, and then, plus you've got the shop rights,
Right. What's gonna happen there?
empty now.
Right.
Some group out of New Jersey bought it.
Oh,
So this new expansion is in the New Scotland portion of the
It's,
property?
Plug is going entirely in New Scotland, right? This part will be in New Scotland. This semiconductor supply company is looking at the old monolith solar, the skeletal steel structure that's out there.
Those are the guys that left us with some solar panels on one of our properties.
Oh, did they? Monolith? Yeah, I hear that was a real mess when that thing fell apart, huh?
Snake oil salesman.
Yeah.
oh, boy. Okay, so moving forward, we're gonna make a motion to the board to accept as presented.
Yeah, probably to do with the cleanest, we would have a public hearing resolution approved
Okay.
at the June meeting.
Okay,
Right, so we're
Public hearing.
thinking, we'd probably do the Atlas Copco and this policy hearing at the same day. It has to be
okay.
two separate notices, but it'll be a little bit more efficient for us.
And should we, Joe, send out the proposed document to all the other board members now
Oh, sure.
for them to
Oh,
review
yeah, we can do
before we make any decisions
Yeah.
as a board?
And the ultimate approval, once you have the public hearing, would be at the July meeting,
Okay,
assuming you have a July meeting.
So would there be a motion here by this group to
say that,
approve the draft and forward it to the?
Recommended to
to the-
approval.
Recommended, recommended for consideration and approval by the full board.
Yeah, that's right, we would be, that's right, we would be able to, we'll have the June meeting and then, we'll be until July.
well, I'll make a motion to move it forward.
Second.
All in favor?
Carried unanimously.
All one of you?
Hey, so if you know anybody looking for a job, we need a kind of a higher level administrative person to support the IDA. I didn't tell you that this kid quit.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
The guy that we got the email about yesterday is no longer with us.
I probably should
Everybody
read
else
this whole
is chiming
thing.
in, oh, welcome aboard.
He drives from Grafton into downtown, that was too anxiety provoking.
Well, there's a lot of anxiety here, so he probably made the right decision. So,
That's the
what,
comment I made.
Come on,
tell me about the functions of the person that you're
it's
looking for.
really just to